The moment I whispered, "He just needs a mum," to the most dangerous man in Chicago, I knew my peaceful life managing a tech startup was officially over. Vincent Romano's golden eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my tablet crash in my trembling hands, and the 3-year-old boy in his arms finally stopped crying for the first time in what looked like weeks. That simple sentence had just made me either his salvation or his next target. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me rewind to how a 28-year-old software consultant ended up whispering parenting advice to a man whose net worth probably exceeded most small countries' GDP. On this Tuesday evening, I'd been sitting in Ricci's, the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where they don't list prices on the menu, because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. I was there for a business dinner with potential investors for my fintech app, because apparently disrupting the payment industry requires eating overpriced pasta with venture capitalists who think blockchain is a magic word. My date was Marcus Webb, a silver-haired VC who'd been name-dropping cryptocurrency projects all evening while I tried to explain why my app's AI-driven security protocols were revolutionary. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was discussing digital money laundering prevention while sitting in what was obviously a cash-heavy establishment where half the patrons looked like they'd never heard of legitimate income reporting. "So your algorithm can detect suspicious transaction patterns in real time?" Marcus asked, swirling his wine with the confidence of someone who'd never had to check his bank balance before making a purchase. "Not just detect," I replied, pulling up demos on my tablet. "It creates behavioral profiles and flags anomalies before they become problems. Think of it as a digital bouncer for financial institutions. That's when the restaurant went silent, the kind of silence that happens when predators enter a room full of prey." I looked up from my presentation to see 6 men in black suits forming a perimeter near the entrance. They moved with military precision, eyes scanning the dining room like they were mapping escape routes and threat assessments simultaneously. Then he walked in. Vincent Romano was the kind of man who didn't need to announce his presence. The universe rearranged itself around him automatically. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair perfectly styled and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, he wore his power like a second skin. The charcoal suit probably cost more than most people's cars, but it was his eyes that caught my attention. Golden amber, beautiful and absolutely lethal. In his arms was a small boy, maybe 3 years old, dressed in miniature formal wear that somehow made the sight even more heartbreaking. The child's face was buried in his father's shoulder, tiny fists clutching the expensive fabric of that perfect suit. "Jesus," Marcus whispered beside me. "That's Vincent Romano." I didn't recognize the name, but I understood the fear that rippled through the restaurant like a shockwave. Conversations died mid-sentence. Waiters pressed themselves against walls. The owner materialized from the kitchen, wringing his hands nervously. "Who is he?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew I wouldn't like the answer. "Runs the Romano family," Marcus said quietly. "Legitimate businesses on the surface, but everyone knows the real money comes from the other sources. That kid must be his son, Luca." The little boy started crying, not the normal tears of a cranky toddler, but the deep, soul-wrenching sobs of someone who understood loss in ways no child should. The sound cut through the restaurant's silence like a knife, and I watched Vincent Romano, this man who probably commanded fear from some of the most dangerous people in the city, look completely helpless. He tried everything, offered food, promised toys, spoke in gentle Italian. Nothing worked. The crying escalated until other diners started shifting uncomfortably, some asking for their checks. Marcus looked mortified, probably calculating how this scene would affect his reputation at his country club. But all I could see was a grieving child and a father who was drowning. "Excuse me," I said, standing up before my brain could stop me. "Sophia, sit down," Marcus hissed. "You don't know what you're doing." He was right. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but watching that little boy cry was like reliving every moment of my own childhood when my mom worked 3 jobs and I'd wished someone, anyone, would just hold me when the nightmares came. I walked toward their table. The bodyguards moved immediately, forming a wall of black suits between me and their boss. One put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Miss, step back. I just want to help," I said quietly, never taking my eyes off the crying child. Vincent Romano's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Let her through." The men parted instantly. Up close, Vincent was even more overwhelming. The sharp angles of his face, the expensive cologne, the raw power that radiated from him like heat. But I focused on Luca. "Hi there," I said softly, crouching down to his eye level. "My name is Sophia." The sobbing stuttered. Little golden eyes peeked at me from his father's shoulder. "That's a lot of big feelings for such a little guy," I continued. "It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry." "Please," Vincent said, and the desperation in his voice cracked something in my chest. "He's been like this for weeks. The doctors say he's grieving, but nothing helps." I looked up at this powerful man and saw what the rest of the restaurant couldn't, a father who was breaking alongside his son. And suddenly I understood. "He just needs a mum," I whispered. The words hung in the air between us. Vincent's eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my tablet slip from my trembling fingers and crash to the floor, the screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern. But Luca's crying stopped. For the first time in what was clearly weeks, silence. "What did you say?" Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. "He's not just grieving," I said quietly. "He's looking for her, for his mother. He needs to know that someone else can fill that role, even temporarily." Luca lifted his head fully now, studying me with those golden eyes that were identical to his father's. Without hesitation, he reached toward me. I looked at Vincent, asking permission. He nodded slowly. The moment Luca settled into my arms, something shifted in the restaurant's atmosphere. The child relaxed against me, his breathing evening out as I rubbed his back in slow circles. "How did you know?" Vincent asked. "Lost my dad when I was 4, I said simply. "Sometimes you just recognize the pain." We sat there in the middle of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, the most dangerous man in the city, his traumatized son, and a tech consultant who'd just thrown away her evening, trying to secure funding for an app that might never see the light of day. But for some reason, it felt like the most important thing I'd ever done. "Can I ask what happened to his mother?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Car accident. 3 months ago. She was—" He stopped, looking at his son. "She was everything to him." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "You work in tech," he said, nodding toward my shattered tablet. It wasn't a question. FinTech, developing security algorithms for financial institutions. I realized how that might sound to someone whose business probably relied on financial opacity. Fraud prevention, mostly. Something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Interesting." Marcus appeared at my elbow, clearly torn between horror and fascination. "Sophia, we should go." Vincent's attention shifted to Marcus, and I watched the temperature in his gaze drop about 20 degrees. "You're leaving. Mr. Webb was just—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted, "I just remembered I have an early morning meeting." "Rain check on the rest of dinner?" The coward practically sprinted for the exit. Vincent watched him go, then turned back to me. "He left you here." "Apparently." I couldn't help the sarcasm creeping into my voice, though I suppose discussing fraud prevention with someone who probably considers it a how-to guide might have made him uncomfortable. That earned me a genuine smile. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." Luca had fallen asleep in my arms, his small body completely relaxed for the first time since I'd walked over. Vincent looked at his son with an expression of pure love and fierce protectiveness. "Thank you," he said simply. "He's a sweet kid." "He just misses her." "Yes, he does." Vincent hesitated. "Ms. Sophia Chen. And before you ask, yes, my mother was Chinese, my father was American, and I grew up speaking Mandarin, English, and enough Italian to get by in restaurants like this." "Sophia Chen," he repeated, like he was filing the information away. "What are you doing tomorrow night?" The question caught me off guard. Why? "Because my son just fell asleep in a stranger's arms for the first time in 3 months, and I think he might need you again." I should have said no. Should have recognized that getting involved with Vincent Romano was like volunteering to play Russian roulette with a loaded gun. Should have understood that men like him didn't make requests. They made offers you couldn't refuse. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Okay." Vincent Romano's penthouse was exactly what I'd expected from a man who probably owned half of Chicago's skyline, if Frank Lloyd Wright had designed a fortress for a digital-age emperor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. Smart home technology controlled everything from lighting to temperature with voice commands, and the security system was more sophisticated than most government buildings. What I hadn't expected was the Tesla Model S in the garage, the wall of servers in his home office, or the fact that he apparently coded in Python. "You're surprised," Vincent said, watching me examine his setup while Luca played with building blocks on the living room floor. tech billionaire wasn't exactly the image I had of Chicago's most powerful crime boss, I admitted, running my fingers along what looked like a custom cryptocurrency mining rig. Though I guess digital currencies make money laundering significantly easier. He laughed. Actually laughed. You really don't have a filter, do you? Not when I'm nervous. Fair warning. It had been exactly 1 week since that Tuesday night at Ricci's when everything changed. 7 days of Vincent picking me up from my modest apartment in his armored Mercedes, because apparently normal cars were for people who didn't have enemies with high-powered rifles. 7 evenings of dinner, time with Luca, and watching a traumatized little boy slowly, carefully start to trust again. His nightmares were still frequent. He still had moments of inconsolable crying, but there were glimpses of the happy child he used to be. But tonight felt different, more intimate. Vincent had cooked dinner himself. Apparently dangerous crime bosses could make incredible pasta sauce. And after Luca went to bed with only minimal tears and one request for me to check his room for monsters, Vincent had offered to show me his legitimate business interests. "This is impressive," I said, gesturing to his trading setup. Multiple monitors displayed real-time market data, cryptocurrency exchanges, and what looked like automated investment algorithms. "You built this yourself?" "Started coding when I was 12. MIT wanted to offer me a full scholarship, but family obligations called first." "Family obligations being taking over an organized crime empire?" "Something like that." Vincent poured 2 glasses of wine that probably cost more than my rent. "Although empire might be overstating things, we're more of a consulting firm. Consulting firm that requires bulletproof cars and armed escorts. Competition can be fierce in certain business sectors." I had to admire his commitment to euphemisms. "What exactly do you consult on?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, studying me over his wine glass. "Import-export logistics, financial consulting, conflict resolution, information security. That's quite a range. Diverse portfolio." He moved closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him that made my brain temporarily malfunction. "What about you? How does a fintech engineer end up single and eating dinner alone on a Tuesday night?" The question hit closer to home than I'd expected. "Long story. I have time." I debated deflecting, but something in his expression told me he genuinely wanted to know. "Previous relationship didn't end well. Turns out, discovering your boyfriend has been using your algorithms to help his hedge fund commit securities fraud is quite the romance killer." Vincent's expression darkened. "He used you for 8 months, pretended to love me while stealing my work and selling it to the highest bidder." I took a long sip of wine. "By the time I figured it out, he'd made millions, and I was facing potential criminal charges for developing the technology." "What happened to him?" "Disappeared. Took the money and vanished somewhere without extradition treaties. Last I heard, he was living in a compound in Monaco." "David Harrison," Vincent said quietly. I nearly dropped my wine glass. "How do you know that name?" "I make it my business to know about people who matter to me." His tone was casual, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "He also owes money to some very unforgiving individuals. You had me investigated. Thoroughly. No apology, no shame. I needed to know who was getting close to my son. I should have been angry, should have felt violated. Instead, I felt something that was probably very stupid, protected. Find anything interesting?" "MIT graduate valedictorian, 3 published papers on algorithmic fraud detection. No criminal record. Parents died in a car crash when you were 22, no siblings. Clean credit report despite financial struggles." He paused. "And you've been developing something new, something big." My blood ran cold. "You went through my personal files?" "Your laptop security is embarrassingly weak for someone who builds financial protection software." Vincent moved to his computer, and within seconds, my own algorithm displays were mirrored on his screens. "This is brilliant, Sophia. Revolutionary even. A real-time fraud detection system that learns and adapts to new threats automatically. You had no right. This technology could be worth hundreds of millions. Why haven't you patented it?" "Because I can't afford the legal fees to protect it. And I learned my lesson about trusting people with valuable intellectual property." Vincent turned from the screen to look at me. "What if I told you I could make that problem disappear? I'd ask what you want in return." "Partnership." The word hung between us like a loaded weapon. "What kind of partnership?" "The legitimate kind. I invest in your technology, provide legal protection and funding. You develop it into a marketable product. 60-40 split. You maintain creative control. And the illegitimate part. There is no illegitimate part. Vincent's voice was firm. Some opportunities require walking away from old business models. I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want to go legitimate. I want to build something for my son that he can be proud of. Vincent's expression softened when he mentioned Luca. Something clean that won't put a target on his back for the rest of his life. And you think my fraud detection software is your ticket out? I think your software could revolutionize financial security worldwide. Combined with my resources and connections, we could build something unprecedented. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was everything I'd dreamed of when I first started developing the algorithm. Financial security, legal protection, the ability to see my work actually make a difference in the world. But partnerships with men like Vincent Romano came with prices that weren't always listed in the contract. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. Vincent moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. But while you're thinking, remember that Luca needs you too. This partnership wouldn't just be professional. What do you mean? He's having fewer nightmares when you're here, eating better, laughing more. You did that, Sophia. You're bringing my son back to life. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Vincent, I care about Luca. But you're scared of me. It wasn't a question. I'm scared of what you represent, of what getting involved with you might cost. And what if I told you that not getting involved might cost you more? The threat was subtle but unmistakable. I looked at him carefully, trying to read whether this was negotiation or coercion. That sounded an awful lot like a threat. Did it? Vincent's expression didn't change. I meant it as information. Your ex-boyfriend? The one hiding in Monaco. His debts are coming due soon. Creditors have long memories and very creative collection methods. What does that have to do with me? They might come looking for the technology he stole. The algorithms you developed. They might think you know where he is or how to access his accounts. My hands started shaking. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying the world is a dangerous place for someone with your skills and your connection to David Harrison. Vincent reached out and gently took my trembling hands in his. But it doesn't have to be. If I agree to your partnership, if you let me protect you, the business partnership is separate, a legitimate opportunity regardless of other considerations. I pulled my hands away, needing space to think clearly. I should go. My driver will take you home. I can take an Uber. Not from here. You can't. Vincent's tone brooked no argument. My address isn't exactly public information, and I prefer to control who knows about visits. Right. Because normal people don't need to worry about their home addresses being traced back to business rivals with military-grade weapons. As Vincent walked me to the door, Luca appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. Sophie, go, he asked in that heartbreaking way toddlers do when they don't understand why people leave. I looked up at Vincent, who nodded permission. I climbed the stairs and knelt down to Luca's level. Sophie has to go home now. Sweetheart, but I'll see you again soon, okay? Promise? I looked into those golden eyes so much like his father's and felt something in my chest crack open. I promise. Luca wrapped his small arms around my neck in a fierce hug, and I understood with devastating clarity that this wasn't just about business partnerships or personal safety anymore. I was already falling in love with this little boy, which meant Vincent Romano had just acquired the perfect leverage to ensure I'd never really be able to walk away. As his driver navigated through Chicago's late-night traffic, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. David Harrison found dead in Monaco this morning. Apparent suicide. Thought you should know. YV. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Finding out that your ex-boyfriend was dead should probably have affected me more than it did, but discovering that Vincent Romano had likely orchestrated the death of a man who'd stolen from me and left me facing criminal charges, that was complicated in ways my brain wasn't equipped to handle, especially since the news broke just 12 hours after Vincent had casually mentioned David's overdue debts to dangerous creditors. You look like you've seen a ghost, my business partner and best friend Kelly said, sliding into the coffee shop booth across from me. Though considering you've been spending evenings with Chicago's answer to Tony Soprano, maybe you have. David's dead, I said without preamble. Kelly nearly choked on her latte. What? When? How? Yesterday morning. Monaco police are calling it suicide, but the timing is... I trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence without sounding paranoid. Suspicious as hell? Kelly finished. Sophia, please tell me you're not thinking Vincent Romano had something to do with this. I'm not thinking it. I'm almost certain of it. Kelly stared at me for a long moment. And how do you feel about that? The question caught me off guard because I'd been asking myself the same thing all morning. I should be horrified, right? Should be calling the FBI and entering witness protection? Should be, yes. Are you? That's the problem. I'm not. I rubbed my temples, trying to ease the tension headache that had been building all day. David destroyed my life, Kelly. He stole my work, left me with legal bills I'm still paying off, and disappeared with enough money to buy a small country. Part of me is relieved he's gone. And the other part? Is terrified that I'm falling for a man who solves problems by making people disappear. Kelly leaned back in her chair, studying me with the expression she usually reserved for debugging complex code. You're in love with him. I'm in love with his son, I corrected. Vincent is complicated. Complicated how? Besides the obvious murder thing. I thought about how to explain the past 2 weeks, the way Vincent listened when I talked about my algorithms like they were the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. How he'd quietly arranged for Luca's nightmares to stop by installing a smart nightlight system that gradually adjusted color and brightness based on sleep patterns. The way he'd looked at me last night when I'd promised Luca I'd see him again soon, like I'd just given him something invaluable. He's not what I expected, I said finally. He's brilliant, like genuinely brilliant. Built his own cryptocurrency trading algorithms, has a master's degree in computer science, speaks 4 languages, and with Luca, I paused, remembering Vincent reading bedtime stories in Italian, his voice gentle and patient even when his son asked the same question 17 times in a row. But he's still a criminal. Yes, no, maybe. I groaned in frustration. His businesses are mostly legitimate now. The illegal stuff seems to be mostly legacy operations that he's trying to wind down. Key word being mostly. Kelly, what if he's serious about going completely clean? What if my algorithm could actually help him transition into legitimate tech entrepreneurship? Then you'd be laundering his reputation instead of his money, which isn't exactly a moral upgrade. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Luca asking for Sophie. Dinner tonight? Have something important to discuss. I showed Kelly the message. She read it and shook her head. You're going to say yes, aren't you? He's 3 years old. Kelly, he lost his mother 3 months ago and now he's attached to me. I can't just disappear from his life. And his father. Can you disappear from his life? The honest answer was that I wasn't sure I wanted to, which was probably the most dangerous thing I could admit, even to myself. I'm meeting with investors tomorrow about the algorithm, I said, changing the subject. Real investors this time, not venture capitalists who bail at the first sign of complications. Government contracts. Potentially. Homeland Security is interested in the real-time fraud detection capabilities for preventing terrorist financing. Kelly's expression grew serious. Sophia, if you're developing technology for federal agencies, getting involved with Vincent Romano isn't just morally complicated, it could be legally disastrous. She was right, and I knew it. But as I typed my response to Vincent, yes to dinner. What do you want to discuss? I realized I was already too far down this path to turn back. That evening, Vincent picked me up in a different car, a sleek BMW instead of the armored Mercedes. Keeping a lower profile tonight? I asked as we drove through downtown Chicago. Taking you somewhere special, he said. Luca's excited to show you his surprise. What kind of surprise? Vincent smiled, and I caught a glimpse of what he must have been like before life forced him into becoming the kind of man people feared. You'll see. We pulled up to Navy Pier, which was unusually quiet for a Friday evening. As we approached the Ferris wheel, I realized why. Vincent had rented the entire attraction for the evening. You bought out Navy Pier. Just the Ferris wheel. Luca wanted to show you the city from up high, but crowds make my security team nervous. Of course they did, because normal 3-year-olds didn't need armed escorts for outings to tourist attractions. But when I saw Luca's face light up as he spotted me, all my concerns about the ethics of private amusement park rentals evaporated. The little boy launched himself into my arms with the kind of pure joy that reminded me why I'd gotten involved in this complicated situation in the first place. Sophie, look! Luca pointed excitedly at the massive Ferris wheel. Daddy made it just for us. That's pretty amazing, sweetheart. As we rode to the top of the wheel, Chicago's skyline spreading out before us like a glittering circuit board, Vincent turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen before, vulnerable, almost uncertain. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "Another one. Marry me." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Marry me," Vincent repeated, his voice steady but his hands betraying his nervousness. "Legal marriage, full partnership in all my legitimate businesses, complete protection from any fallout from your connection to David Harrison." "Vincent, we've known each other for 2 weeks. I know it's insane, but Luca needs a mother. I need a partner who understands both technology and discretion, and you need security that I can provide." I looked at Luca, who was pressed against the window, pointing out landmarks with the excitement of someone seeing the world from this height for the first time. "This is about Luca. It started as being about Luca," Vincent said quietly, "but somewhere in the past 2 weeks it became about more than that." "What do you mean?" "I mean that watching you bring my son back to life made me realize I've been dead too. For years I've been going through the motions, running businesses, managing obligations, surviving. But with you," he paused, looking out at the city below, "with you, I remember what it feels like to want something more than just survival." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. "Vincent, I'm not asking you to love me, Sophia. I'm asking you to be my partner. In business, in raising Luca, in building something better than what we inherited from our past mistakes. And if I say no, then my driver takes you home tonight. I transfer $50,000 to your account to compensate you for your time these past 2 weeks, and you never hear from us again." The offer was clean, clear, and somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. "You'd let me walk away?" "I'd hate it, but yes. I won't force you into this life, Sophia, but I hope you'll choose it." I looked at Luca, who had fallen asleep against my shoulder as the Ferris wheel completed its circuit, at Vincent, whose amber eyes held hopes I wasn't sure I was brave enough to fulfill, at the city below, full of possibilities and dangers in equal measure. "I need time to think." "How much time?" "A week." Vincent nodded slowly. 1 week. "But Sophia," he reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Remember that some opportunities don't come twice." As the Ferris wheel descended back to earth, I realized that Vincent Romano had just offered me everything I thought I wanted: financial security, legal protection, a family, and the chance to make my technological innovations matter on a global scale. The only price was my freedom, my safety, and quite possibly my soul. But looking at the sleeping child in my arms, I was beginning to think that might be a price I was willing to pay. The FBI knocked on my door at exactly 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning, exactly 1 week and 2 days after that first Tuesday night at Ricci's, which meant they'd been watching me long enough to know I was always awake by 6:30. Special Agent Sarah Chen, no relation despite sharing my last name, showed me her badge with the kind of professional smile that suggested this wasn't a social call about my weekend plans. "Ms. Chen, we'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Vincent Romano." I was still in my pajamas, clutching a cup of coffee like a lifeline, and trying to process how my life had gone from relatively normal to federal investigation in the span of just over a week. "Should I call a lawyer?" "That's your right, but we're hoping you'll cooperate voluntarily. We believe you may have information that could help with an ongoing investigation." "What kind of investigation?" Agent Chen stepped into my apartment uninvited. Her partner, a stern-looking man who introduced himself as Agent Martinez, following close behind. "The kind that involves organized crime, money laundering, and the suspicious death of David Harrison in Monaco last Friday." My blood turned to ice water. "David's death was ruled a suicide." "Interesting that you know the details so quickly," Agent Martinez said, settling onto my couch like he planned to stay a while. "Most people wouldn't know about international death rulings unless they had a personal interest in the outcome." I realized I'd just made a mistake. David was my ex-boyfriend. Of course I'd want to know what happened to him. "Your ex-boyfriend who stole your proprietary algorithms and fled the country with several $1 million of investor money," Agent Chen added. "That must have been frustrating." "Frustrating enough to want him dead?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "We're not suggesting you killed him," Agent Martinez said, "but we think you might know who did." They showed me photographs then, surveillance images of Vincent and me at dinner, entering his building, riding the Ferris wheel with Luca. Apparently, federal agencies had much better camera equipment than I'd realized. Mr. Romano has taken quite an interest in you, Agent Chen observed. Care to explain why Chicago's most powerful crime boss is suddenly playing house with a fintech developer? Maybe he likes smart women, or maybe he needs your expertise for something specific. Agent Martinez leaned forward. We know about your fraud detection algorithms, Ms. Chen. We also know that Romano's been trying to legitimize his operations for the past year. Quite a coincidence that you two connected right after your ex-boyfriend's convenient death. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think Vincent is using me to clean up his financial operations. We think Vincent Romano is a very intelligent man who doesn't do anything without careful calculation, Agent Chen said. Including romantic relationships. My relationship with Mr. Romano is not romantic. No? Then what would you call spending every evening at his penthouse, helping raise his son, and accepting expensive gifts? I realized they'd been watching me much longer than just the past week. How long have you been surveilling me? Long enough to know that your new boyfriend has been very generous, Agent Martinez said. New wardrobe, expensive dinners, private access to tourist attractions. Must be nice having someone take care of all those legal bills from David Harrison's theft. Vincent hasn't paid my legal bills. Not directly. But isn't it interesting how your debt collectors suddenly stopped calling after you started seeing him? My stomach dropped. Vincent had interfered with my creditors without telling me, which meant he'd been managing my life in ways I hadn't even realized. We're prepared to offer you immunity, Agent Chen said, pulling out an official-looking document. Full protection from any charges related to your association with Romano's organization. Plus witness protection if necessary. All you have to do is cooperate with our investigation. Cooperate how? Keep seeing him. Keep documenting his operations. Help us understand how he's trying to legitimize his money and what role your technology plays in that process. Agent Martinez added, We're particularly interested in his international cryptocurrency transactions and any new financial partnerships he might be developing. I stared at the immunity agreement, trying to process what they were asking me to do. You want me to spy on him? We want you to be a good citizen and help us take down a criminal organization that's been operating with impunity for decades. What about Luca? The agents exchanged glances. What about him? If Vincent goes to prison, what happens to his son? Child Services will find appropriate placement, Agent Chen said dismissively. The casual way she discussed destroying a 3-year-old's life made my decision easier than it should have been. I need to think about this. You have until Friday, Agent Martinez said, standing up. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. After they left, I sat in my apartment, trying to figure out how my life had become the plot of a crime thriller. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Luca asking when Sophie coming over. Dinner tonight? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes, need to talk. That evening, Vincent took one look at my face and sent Luca to play in his room while we talked in the kitchen. The FBI came to see me this morning, I said without preamble. Vincent's expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly. What did they want? They think you killed David Harrison. Do you think I killed David Harrison? The directness of the question caught me off guard. Did you? Not personally, no. That's not the same as saying you didn't arrange it. Vincent poured 2 glasses of wine with steady hands. David Harrison made enemies of some very dangerous people. His death was inevitable. The only question was timing. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you without making you an accessory after the fact. I realized he was protecting me, even while confirming my suspicions. The FBI wants me to spy on you. Document your operations, help them understand your financial structures. And I'm supposed to give them an answer by Friday. Vincent leaned against the counter, studying me with those amber eyes that had become dangerously familiar. What are you going to tell them? I don't know yet. Sophia, if you agree to work with the FBI, I can't protect you anymore. You understand that, right? Is that a threat? It's logistics. Once you're a federal informant, anything I do to help you becomes obstruction of justice. You'll be on your own. The thought was more terrifying than I wanted to admit. What if I refuse to cooperate with them? Then they'll probably arrest you as an accessory to whatever crimes they think I've committed. And if I agree to spy on you, then you'll spend the next few months recording conversations and taking pictures of documents until they have enough evidence to destroy everything I've built. Vincent's voice was calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, including any chance Luca has of growing up with his father. There has to be a third option. There is. Vincent moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, and see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "Marry me. Tonight." "Vincent, spouses can't be compelled to testify against each other. Marriage creates legal protections that dating doesn't. You're talking about marriage as a legal strategy. I'm talking about marriage as protection for both of us." His hands came up to frame my face, thumbs brushing over my cheekbones. "Sophia, I meant what I said on the Ferris wheel. This isn't just about convenience anymore." "What is it about then?" "It's about the fact that I fall asleep thinking about you and wake up wanting to hear your voice. It's about watching you with Luca and seeing the family I never thought I could have. It's about building something clean and legitimate that my son can inherit without shame." His words hit me like a physical force, and I realized that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, I'd stopped thinking of Vincent as a dangerous stranger and started thinking of him as home. "The FBI thinks you're using me." "I am using you," Vincent said quietly, "but not the way they think. I'm using you to remember what it feels like to want something more than just survival. I'm using you to be a better father, a better man. I'm using you to build the kind of life I want Luca to have. And what do you think I'm doing? I think you're using me too. For security, for protection, for the family you lost when your parents died." His smile was soft and knowing. "And I'm okay with that, Sophia, because sometimes the best partnerships are the ones where both people get exactly what they need." Before I could respond, Luca appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Daddy, Sophie stay tonight?" Vincent looked at me and I saw everything in his expression: hope, vulnerability, and a quiet desperation that matched my own. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" I asked Luca. "Yes, Sophie stay forever." Out of the mouths of babes. "Forever is a long time," I said gently. "Not long enough," Vincent murmured, and I realized that my week of thinking time had just been cut short by a 3-year-old's simple request and a father's honest admission that he needed me as much as I needed them. The FBI could wait until Friday for their answer, but I was beginning to think I already knew what it would be. I should have known that Vincent Romano's idea of a wedding would be as unconventional as everything else about him. Instead of a traditional ceremony, I found myself in a private judge's chambers at midnight on Wednesday, exactly 10 days after our first meeting, signing marriage documents, while Luca slept in the courthouse security guard's office, and 3 of Vincent's most trusted associates served as witnesses. The whole thing took exactly 17 minutes, which was probably some kind of record for life-altering decisions. "You can kiss the bride now," Judge Patricia Williams said, with the weary tone of someone who'd been conducting late-night ceremonies for powerful people longer than she cared to remember. Vincent's kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, like he was still giving me a chance to change my mind. When we broke apart, I was wearing a platinum wedding ring with a diamond that caught courthouse fluorescent lighting and threw rainbows across the walls. "Mrs. Romano," Vincent said quietly, testing out my new name. "Mrs. Romano," I repeated, and felt something fundamental shift in my chest. What I didn't expect was waking up the next morning to find FBI agents outside Vincent's building, or discovering that our marriage had made the front page of the Chicago Tribune's business section, or learning that my new husband's legitimate enterprises included a tech startup accelerator that had been quietly funding revolutionary blockchain security research for the past 3 years. "You might have mentioned that you're basically Chicago's version of a venture capitalist," I said over breakfast, while Luca practiced writing his letters at the kitchen table. "You might have mentioned that your fraud detection algorithm has been on the Department of Homeland Security's wish list for the past 6 months," Vincent replied, handing me a tablet displaying email correspondence between federal agencies and various tech companies. I stared at the screen, reading requests for exactly the kind of technology I'd been developing in my spare time. "How did you get access to classified government communications?" "Trade secret." "Vincent, information is currency." "Sophia, the more you have, the more accurately you can predict market movements, regulatory changes, and law enforcement priorities." "Are you saying you hack government systems?" "I'm saying I invest heavily in cybersecurity consulting, and sometimes those investments provide interesting insights into client needs and preferences." I realized my new husband was either a technology genius or a criminal mastermind, possibly both. My phone rang before I could process that revelation fully. Agent Chen's name appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Romano," she said when I answered, her tone notably colder than it had been earlier in the week. "Congratulations on your marriage. I assume this means you're declining our offer of cooperation." "I haven't made any decisions yet." Really? Because marrying the subject of a federal investigation seems like a pretty clear decision to me. I married someone I care about. That doesn't change my willingness to cooperate with legitimate law enforcement requests. How fortunate, because we'd like to meet with you this afternoon, both of you. Vincent, who could apparently hear every word of the conversation, held out his hand for the phone. I gave it to him. Agent Chen, he said calmly. Vincent Romano. I understand you'd like to have a conversation. I couldn't hear her response, but Vincent's expression grew amused. 2 o'clock works fine. My attorney will be present. Of course. He paused. Yes, I'm aware of the federal building's security protocols. No, I won't be bringing armed escorts to a meeting with federal agents. Another pause. Because that would be unnecessarily provocative, and I prefer to keep business discussions civil. He hung up and turned to, We're meeting with them at 2. We? You're my wife now, Sophia. That means your problems are my problems and my problems are yours. We face them together. The federal building downtown was exactly what I'd expected. Imposing, bureaucratic, and designed to make visitors feel small and intimidated. Vincent strode through the metal detectors and security checkpoints like he owned the place, which probably wasn't helping his case with the agents who were already convinced he was dangerous. Our meeting took place in a sterile conference room with Agent Chen, Agent Martinez, and a woman who introduced herself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Walsh. Vincent's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Amanda Foster, took notes on everything while somehow managing to look both bored and intimidating. Mr. Romano, a U.S. Attorney Walsh began, we appreciate you coming in voluntarily. Happy to help with any legitimate law enforcement inquiries, Vincent replied smoothly. Excellent. Let's start with your relationship with David Harrison. I didn't have a relationship with David Harrison, but you were aware of his debt situation. I'm aware of many people's financial difficulties. It's unavoidable in certain business circles. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Business circles that include international money lending and collections? Business circles that include cryptocurrency consulting, financial technology development, and investment management. And when those investments go bad? When clients can't pay their debts? Then I write them off as losses and move on to more promising opportunities. I watched this verbal sparring match and realized that Vincent was playing a completely different game than the federal agents thought. He wasn't denying knowledge of illegal activities. He was reframing them as legitimate business practices. Mrs. Romano, Agent Chen turned to me. Your fraud detection technology could be very valuable to someone trying to avoid law enforcement scrutiny. It could also be valuable to someone trying to prevent financial crimes, I replied. Is that what your husband plans to use it for? I plan to use it for whatever purposes my wife deems appropriate, Vincent interjected. Sophia owns her intellectual property and I respect her autonomy in business decisions. AUS Attorney Walsh opened a thick folder. We have evidence of significant cryptocurrency transactions between accounts linked to your businesses and offshore entities in Monaco, the Cayman Islands, and Switzerland. Cryptocurrency transactions are legal, Amanda Foster said crisply, as is maintaining international business accounts. When those transactions are used to launder money from illegal activities, then you'll need to prove the underlying activities were illegal, Amanda interrupted, which, based on the evidence you've shared so far, seems unlikely. I realized that Vincent's lawyer was better prepared for this meeting than the federal agents were, which suggested this wasn't his first time being investigated. Mr. Romano, Agent Martinez tried a different approach. Your organization has been linked to several businesses that the Treasury Department considers suspicious. Linked how? Financial relationships? Shared investors? Overlapping board members? I invest in many businesses. Sometimes other investors and board members have diverse portfolios as well. That's how capitalism works. And when those other investors include known criminals? Then I do due diligence and make decisions based on risk assessment and potential return on investment. What kind of due diligence? Vincent smiled, and I saw a flash of the predator that lurked beneath his civilized exterior. The kind that ensures my investments are protected from unnecessary complications. The meeting continued for another hour, with agents asking increasingly specific questions about financial structures, business relationships, and Vincent's knowledge of various criminal activities. Throughout it all, my husband answered with the calm precision of someone who'd been expecting this conversation for years and had prepared accordingly. One final question. AUS Attorney Walsh said as we prepared to leave. Mrs. Romano, are you cooperating with your husband's business activities willingly? I'm cooperating with my husband's legitimate business activities enthusiastically, I replied. And I'm committed to ensuring that our technology ventures operate within full compliance of all applicable laws, even if that means reporting suspicious activities to appropriate authorities. I felt Vincent's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on mine. Especially then. As we left the federal building, I realized I'd just committed myself to walking a very narrow line between protecting my new family and satisfying federal investigators who were determined to find evidence of crimes that might not actually exist anymore. That went well, Vincent said, as his driver opened the car door. Did it? They have suspicions but no evidence. They're fishing, hoping we'll panic and make mistakes. And will we? Vincent settled into the seat beside me, his expression thoughtful. That depends on how quickly we can make my entire operation completely legitimate. How quickly are we talking? 6 months, maybe less if your technology works as well as I think it will. I stared at him. You're serious about going completely clean? Sophia, the old ways of doing business are ending whether I want them to or not. Technology is making it impossible to operate in shadows, and law enforcement is getting better at following digital trails. He took my hand, thumb brushing over my new wedding ring. I can either adapt or become extinct. I choose adaptation, and if the FBI doesn't believe you're really changing, then we'll prove it to them, together. As Chicago's skyline passed by outside the car windows, I realized that my marriage to Vincent Romano wasn't just about love or protection or legal immunity. It was about redemption, his and mine. The only question was whether we could legitimize his empire fast enough to stay ahead of federal investigators who were running out of patience and looking for someone to blame for decades of unsolved crimes. But looking at my wedding ring and thinking about Luca waiting for us at home, I was beginning to think that some gambles were worth taking, even the ones that could cost you everything. 3 months into my marriage to Vincent Romano, I discovered that legitimizing a criminal empire was significantly more complicated than debugging code, required more patience than teaching a toddler to tie his shoes, and was somehow more stressful than both of those things combined. It also turned out to be the most important work I'd ever done. The Treasury Department approved our fintech license, I announced, bursting into Vincent's home office, where he was video conferencing with what I'd learned were his transition consultants. Basically, the world's most expensive team of lawyers, accountants, and former federal agents who specialized in helping people convert questionable business practices into defensible ones. Vincent's smile could have powered the Chicago electrical grid. All regulatory requirements met. Every single one. We're officially authorized to operate a digital payment processing platform with international capabilities. I set the approval documents on his desk with the satisfaction of someone who'd just completed the most thorough compliance audit in federal history. Your cryptocurrency consulting business is now completely legitimate. Our cryptocurrency consulting business, Vincent corrected, pulling me onto his lap in the chair. 50-50 partners, remember? 60-40. I negotiated up after you admitted you'd had my apartment under surveillance before we met. That was security research, not surveillance. That was creepy stalking, not security research. Vincent laughed, the sound rich and warm and nothing like the controlled responses I'd heard him give to federal agents or business rivals. 3 months of marriage had taught me the difference between his public persona and his private self, and I'd fallen in love with both versions. Daddy! Sophie! Look what I made! Luca burst into the office carrying a drawing that appeared to depict our family as stick figures standing in front of a house. The artistic quality was questionable, but the emotional impact was devastating. That's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, lifting him up to examine his artwork properly. Is that our house? It's our new house, Luca corrected seriously. The one with the big yard and the swing set and the puppy. Vincent and I exchanged glances. We'd been discussing buying a house outside the city, somewhere Luca could have a normal childhood, without armed security guards in the driveway and bulletproof windows in his bedroom. But we hadn't mentioned it to him yet. What kind of puppy? Vincent asked. A big one that barks at bad guys. I think that's called a guard dog, I said, ruffling his hair. Can we get one, Daddy, please? Vincent looked at me with an expression that suggested he'd already made up his mind. We'll see. Which, in Vincent's speak, meant, yes, but I need to research the most secure dog breeds and hire professional trainers first. "Luca, why don't you go show Rosa your picture?" I suggested. "I think she's making your favorite cookies." After he raced off to find our housekeeper, Vincent turned back to me. "The FBI called this morning." My stomach dropped. "What did they want?" "To inform us that they're closing their investigation." I stared at him. "What?" "Insufficient evidence to pursue charges. They're officially classifying my organization as a legitimate business enterprise with no ongoing criminal activities." The relief was so intense I felt lightheaded. "It's over? It's over." Vincent's hands came up to frame my face, thumbs brushing over my cheekbones in the gesture that had become completely familiar over the past few months. "We did it, Sophia. We actually did it. We legitimized your entire operation in 3 months. We legitimized our entire operation in 3 months. Using your fraud detection technology to clean up financial structures, your compliance expertise to satisfy federal requirements, and my business connections to transition existing relationships into legal frameworks." I thought about the past 12 weeks, the late nights reviewing financial records, the endless meetings with regulatory agencies, the careful restructuring of business relationships that had existed in legal gray areas for decades. Vincent hadn't just been cleaning up his act, he'd been systematically rebuilding his entire empire from the ground up. What happens to the people who worked for you before? The ones whose jobs depended on the illegal activities. Most of them are moving into legitimate roles in our expanded technology consulting division. The ones who prefer the old ways of doing business are finding opportunities with organizations that haven't adapted to modern realities. And the people who might not want you to succeed in going legitimate. Vincent's expression grew serious. "There will always be people who prefer chaos to order, Sophia. But our security is better than theirs, our legal protection is stronger, and our technology gives us advantages they can't match." In other words, the good guys won. The smart guys won. Whether we're good or not remains to be seen. Before I could respond to that philosophical observation, my laptop chimed with an incoming video call from Kelly. "Sophia, how did the Treasury meeting go?" she asked the moment I accepted the call. "We got approval, official federal licensing for everything." Kelly's celebration was enthusiastic enough to make Luca come running back to see what the excitement was about. "Does this mean you can finally tell me what your husband actually does for a living?" "He's a technology entrepreneur," I said, which was technically true, even if it didn't capture the full complexity of Vincent's career transition. "And the criminal empire thing?" "What criminal empire?" Vincent asked innocently from behind me. Kelly laughed. "I like him. He's almost as good at evading questions as you are." "It's a family trait," I said. "Speaking of family," Kelly continued, "when am I meeting this stepson I keep hearing about?" "Uncle Kelly," Luca shouted, apparently having decided that anyone important to me was automatically family. "Did he just call me Uncle Kelly?" "He calls everyone uncle or aunt until he learns their actual relationship to him," I explained. "Last week he called the grocery store clerk Grandpa Steve. I love him already. When can I visit?" Vincent leaned into the camera frame. "This weekend we're having a housewarming party for the new place." I turned to stare at him. "What new place?" "The one Luca drew a picture of. I may have already put in an offer on a house with a large yard, potential for swing set installation, and appropriate security features for someone with our unique lifestyle requirements." "You bought a house without telling me." "I made an offer on a house after discussing it extensively with my wife, who agreed that our son needed space to grow up normally." "When did we discuss this extensively?" "Every time you mentioned wanting Luca to have a normal childhood, which has been approximately 47 times in the past month." I realized my husband had been listening more carefully to my casual comments than I'd realized. "What kind of house?" "The kind with 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and enough land for a very large dog." "Daddy said we could get a puppy," Luca announced to Kelly through the laptop screen. "Did Daddy say that?" Kelly asked, grinning at Vincent. "Daddy said we'd see, which means yes, but he needs to research the best security dogs first," I translated. "Security dogs?" "Old habits," Vincent said with a shrug, as I watched my husband explain to Kelly why German Shepherds made excellent family pets, while Luca added his own commentary about wanting a dog big enough to ride like a horse. I realized that this strange, complicated, wonderful life I'd stumbled into was exactly what I'd been looking for without knowing it. 6 months ago, I'd been a broke software developer with trust issues and a stolen algorithm. Now I was married to a reformed crime boss, raising his traumatized son, running a multi-million-dollar technology company, and apparently moving into a house with enough space for a small private security force, disguised as family pets. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was exactly the life I wanted. "Mrs. Romano," Vincent said quietly, using the formal address that still made my heart skip a beat. "Are you happy?" I looked at Luca, who was drawing pictures of stick-figure families and enormous dogs, at my laptop screen, where Kelly was taking notes about appropriate housewarming gifts for reformed criminals. At Vincent, whose amber eyes held all the love and hope and fierce protectiveness that had made me fall for him despite every logical reason to run away. "Impossibly happy," I said, echoing the words he'd used months ago when I'd first agreed to stay for dinner. "Good," Vincent said, pulling me closer. "Because this is just the beginning." He was right. We'd legitimized his business empire, satisfied federal investigators, built a family, and created something neither of us could have imagined when I'd first walked over to comfort a crying child in an expensive restaurant. But more than that, we'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous choice is the one that saves you. Sometimes love arrives in the form of a traumatized toddler and his desperate father. Sometimes the best partnerships are built on mutual need that grows into something deeper. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get to keep the family you choose. As Luca climbed into my lap to show me his latest artistic creation, apparently our new house would also have a pool and a helicopter landing pad, I realized that Vincent Romano had given me everything I'd never dared to hope for. A home, a purpose, a love worth fighting for, and a future that looked nothing like my past. It was more than enough. It was everything.